Here we go. So going ahead, I'm just going to walk really, really quickly through some numbers. Those of you who were in the town hall, this is going to be somewhat duplicative. Those of you who were in peer groups, though, you'll see a quick update on everything coming out now. There we go. So here's where we're at overall. When you look at the INN network, it's about 250. There's now 3,500 people working in nonprofit news, about 2,300 journalists. We're seeing that number go up steadily year over year. 70% work in editorial, 30% business and tech. 13% of nonprofit news organizations are led by people of color. We don't yet have an overall measure of percentage of all staff, but we really believe it's important to track the leadership, and so this we track on an ongoing basis. That means they're the founder, the executive director, or in the C-level top staff. Median staff size in nonprofit news is about 6.3 full-time equivalents. You know, we have to stop ourselves. We keep saying, oh, well, they're small in size, and then we're reading the story about Ithaca and how many Gannett newspaper towns only have one reporter, and we realize that the nonprofit newsrooms are no longer small relative to other local news actually anymore. There's a wide variance in this. There are big organizations that have dozens and dozens, and a lot that are 2 and 3 people. The bulk, though, you're seeing, you know, the biggest percentage is in that 4 to 10 range. Financials, here's how we came into this year. We released the index early in the spring and really scrambled to do it because we think this is a really important marker. It's this moment of time. What was the strength coming into this insane disruptive year? And here's where we are at. I mean, people were still gaining. Diversification of revenue continues. Now, the earned revenue part of that is likely to be pretty disrupted this year. That tends to be events, advertising, and sponsorship, that 11% in room for growth. Fran is putting together with Google some phenomenal programming, though, to help people build earned revenue as the economy opens back up, and we'll have more on that this summer. Where are you at? It's really thirds, right? This third of members that are under 250, that's perennial because there's so many new startups each year and they start small. So that stays about the same, but what's really interesting to me is that those bars above, we have steadily seen grow. You now have a big chunk, another third between 250 and 1 million, and where we have seen steady growth is in the top, that 37%, above 1 million. You are seeing news organizations grow over time. This shows the breakout by local, state, and national. And the thing, you'll be able to look at these pie charts later and see what applies to you. The thing that I would say is watch for nonprofit news to really diverge in a couple of different paths. Increasingly, you see individual giving play a huge part in local news. Foundations continue to play a larger part in national and state. The growth patterns in nonprofit news, what we see developing is you're going to see the growth in funding and overall growth continue to be dominated by very big players at the national and some big state players. The numbers of nonprofit newsrooms will keep going up in local because that's where there is a gap and you have many more smaller organizations being formed. So that affects these financial averages over time, and I just want to encourage people to look at what's most applicable to you rather than the averages for the field as a whole. What's working like in nonprofit news? So here are the comp study results. About 90 of you participated in this, and the conditions are actually pretty good. Average salary, no one's getting rich, but the average salary is about $59,000, and that's decent compared to commercial. Most of the benefits are comparable to commercial media or better than commercial media now. About half our members, have vacation and PTO. You can see the numbers of vacation, sick days, and paid holidays on average. And we were really intrigued that 36% are offering paid parental leave, average of 9 weeks. pretty high percentage of salary. So those are just the headlines. There's a lot of other detail, and that report is now up on the INN site as well. Diversity, equity, inclusion. We're going to be back to you with a lot more on this in the fall. We, when we split INN days and went virtual, we split into the revenue focus now and diversity in the fall, and that's partly so that we can do a deeper analysis. We added DEI measures to the index for the first time this year because AS&E, the nonprofit world wasn't getting captured, and we feel it's so important to capture this early. So Sarah Shariari and all of us will be doing a lot of work over the summer in this area, but I wanted to give you a sense of what we're hearing from the community and key things and where we're focused. So you know, the benchmarking and then tracking the numbers and really looking at this across nonprofit news. The index will be a start of that this year. We see the need to really benchmark positions at all levels. So we have worked a lot. Fran has set up and expanded the Emma Bowen internships, but internships are only important really as we see retention and overall career paths. So we're trying to do that at every level. Reflecting our focus on business and leadership, we are intensely focused when we are concentrating our efforts in DEI on the business and overall leadership. In other words, we have to change the composition of the corner office. There are a lot of people working on diversity in the newsroom. That's really important too, but there's less attention to overall business leadership, which really directs what communities are served and a whole lot of factors that play into inclusive coverage. And we also see a tremendous opportunity in nonprofit news because it's entrepreneurial. So there will be springboard programs and added programs this year and next that Sarah is putting together that help people launch newsrooms in and for their communities. Access to capital, we'll just flag, we are just starting to do more in this. We're huge fans of the Borealis Fund in that the fund increasing equitable grants. We do not have data on this, but we see it's a real issue across our members who serve communities of color and are led by communities of color, and see it as a major issue in making sure nonprofit news is equitable as well. Because philanthropy can be very unbalanced as well. If you are seeking matching funds, if you are relying on community donations, there are patterns there that can really worsen the situation as well as improve it. So something we're increasingly looking at. Diversity also plays a big part in the journalism. Is the quality of journalism that's being produced has to reflect the communities it's serving. And so we look at that as one measure of this. The characteristics of nonprofit news remain very heavily rooted in watchdog journalism and investigative. About 80% of our members, even the really small ones, have at least one investigative reporter or editor on staff. Nonprofits are showing up, as I said, the Pulitzer, the Polk, the Peabody, the top journalism awards. You are seeing nonprofits there every year. And that is carrying down, there's too many to list, but we see this coming up at the local level as well. So the journalism impact of these newsrooms, even the small newsroom, is really significant. As I mentioned earlier, we can estimate from your RSS feeds roughly the total production. Last year, across nonprofit news, this is a conservative estimate. There were at least 150,000 unique original reporting projects a year produced by nonprofit news. We have seen the editorial output just completely spike in the pandemic, so I suspect the output is well above that now. The other big thing that we are seeing in the numbers, and it showed up in the index, is a continued dual approach, but we are seeing more nonprofit news organizations spend more time on developing a direct audience. And that's partly because you're seeing more local, but we think it's very important. That's why you're seeing a growth in individual giving, and you're seeing this diversification of funding. We see it's chicken and the egg, but we're seeing both. And we are seeing members are reporting much more than they used to, that they are working intently on developing their own audiences. That doesn't mean they're not sharing or collaborating. 3/4 of our members still distribute their news through other media partners, and we're working to increase the digital distribution partners as well as the old traditional newspaper and broadcast partners. So that number, the second from the bottom, the 6 and 10 are focused primarily on building their direct audience. That's where you see the shift. That used to be a third. So watch this, and I think this is a trend to pay attention to, and it also reflects the accelerators in other efforts going on. So pandemic, where are we now? What is changing? Look, this is a snapshot, these numbers. The overwhelming word for the situation right now for most of our members is uncertainty. Same as for any small business anywhere in the country, right? We don't know how long a recession may last, the total economic effects. Is the market going to stay up? That affects grant giving a lot. Or is it going to tank in the fall? So all of that is uncertain for nonprofit newsrooms as well as everybody else. So we took this snapshot in May from 90 of you, about 85 of you, answered a quick Outlook survey, and these are the numbers. Coverage is way up. So far, about 60% expect, okay, we're going to be okay financially this year, steady or up. About 40% expect to see their revenue decline. The biggest worry we have, the biggest vulnerability is reserves. About 40% of our members don't have significant financial reserves. So can we get everybody through this year if they are overall, if they're sound and really critical for coverage in their community? And so I think that's the challenge of the rest of the year. And then there's a longer term challenge, which is really looking at the funding of nonprofit news and how do we make sure everyone does have an adequate reserve. All nonprofits need them. Nonprofits have volatile funding and they have variable funding. So we want to make sure we get all our members to having a reserve that can see them through these volatile years. But on the flip side, again, 60% things look okay, 8% see revenue going up. And I will leave on this last point because I think it's really, really important. When we're seeing gains in individual support, that means we're seeing communities become aware of the value of news, step up to support it. And I think that is how we find the path through the pandemic and carry on with news coverage beyond it. So I will wrap there. I'm not sure we have time for any questions, but I will respond after in chat and emails to any that were posted as well.